views are those of the host and not those of Clear Channel Broadcasting licenses. Welcome to CareGiver Reality with your host, David Levy. David Levy brings more than 25 years of practical experience helping thousands of family caregivers find solutions to the challenges and frustrations presented by this important responsibility. So if you are in the position of caring for a spouse, a parent, or a loved one who is no longer able to care for him or herself, or if you know someone who is, this hour will be worth the listening. Now, today's edition of CareGiver Reality and your host, David Levy.
Good evening, South Florida, America, and the world. This is the Caregiver Reality Show. We're coming to you live from WBZT, 12:30 a.m. here in sunny West Palm Beach. And you can listen to us also on any iHeartRadio. Just go to Florida and snap on BZT, www.caregiverreality.com. That about covers the waterfront, maybe a little bit on AMP2 TV. And we're very happy to be here this evening. If you want to speak to us, 1-800-889-0267. And if you're local, 516-844-6167. If I look a little tired on the radio tonight, it's because it's been a long, tough week. And my co-host is Paul Vattiato. Good evening, Paul.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome.
And so it's been a long week of caregiving, and we'll get into some of that soon. And there's never a dull moment in it, as we repeat early and often. One of the first things that I do want to say, you'll hear me repeat it a few more times tonight, we have had a great opportunity to get to drive time 5 to 6 p.m. However, in order to do that, we have been lured back to the station we were on, WWNN, and 1470 AM, and we'll be there starting on Tuesday from 5 o'clock. So if you're going to be in your car, you'll have a great opportunity to listen to us, and we're making a lot of forward progress, and we're looking forward to it.
We'll still be on iHeartRadio, AMP2 Television, CareGiverReality.com.
Right. We just won't be on BZT. Right. And not to say that we didn't enjoy our time here, but when we gave them the opportunity to give us a similar time slot, they just didn't have one, or whatever the circumstances were. So I want to say thank you to BZT for giving us the opportunity to help grow out what we're doing.
And their gracious staff, been terrific.
Yep, it's been terrific. And that's because Freddie is such a great producer. And so anyway, enough accolades to those who deserve it. Paul, what kind of week are you having?
I'm having a great week. For me, things have been looking good with Debbie. She, ups and downs, but today was a very good day.
Good.
And my concern this week was really you.
Oh.
And what was going on with not only your bride, but with family up in Philadelphia. And, we spoke on the way home last week, and you look like you've been through the ringer. And it was just an unbelievable story about Philadelphia. Maybe you could take a few moments and share a little bit about what happened.
Well, just so that you can appreciate what was going on, many of you that have been listening regularly know that, well, first of all, Suzette is doing much better, my wife. She had knee surgery.
She looks great. And
I must tell you that the knee surgery was phenomenal. Some of the things surrounding it didn't work so well, but she's home now. The PT, the therapist, came in to evaluate her today for the first time, and he says, we don't have to work on your knee. We have to work on some upper body strength. So it's really been a remarkable piece of surgery. She's on Tylenol, and that's all. So any of you that are fearful of knee surgery, I must tell you that the surgeon we had, his name is Charles Stewart. He's in Boca Raton. And I'm giving him a free shout-out tonight because he did a spectacular job. And we are really starting to see the benefits of that with Suzette. But many of you know that I am also a long-distance caregiver with my sister for an aunt and an uncle My uncle is 89 or was 89, and I'll get to that part. And my aunt's 92, and they're in an assisted living facility in downtown Philadelphia. And earlier or late last week,
Well, give a little background. What's the condition of them, the state of
well,
health?
my uncle's health has been back and forth. He's been getting ongoing dementia. Historically, he has not had a great heart. He had a valve replacement a few years ago. And he's also a Holocaust survivor who made it out of Austria and to Shanghai and came to this country in 1952 and went to Columbia University, got a degree in social work, and has practiced basically for large towns and communities, helping them raise money to do philanthropic and charitable things that the community needed to do. And he's very good at it.
A good life.
Yeah. And so they were living in Philadelphia, and they didn't want to leave, even though I didn't want to leave them in the Philadelphia assisted living facility because it was the only choice, and it wasn't necessarily a great choice. And my aunt is 92. She's deaf, has very bad eyesight, and is starting to get dementia. But the real interesting part of it was last week on a Wednesday, in the middle of the night, I get a phone call from Hahnemann Hospital, which is in downtown Philadelphia. A great institution, except every time we've had to send my uncle to the hospital, we did University Hospital or Pennsylvania Hospital, which are affiliated with the University of Pennsylvania Medical School, and they're on the Penn Med system, so there's never any issue of what's going on with him. Unfortunately, Hahnemann wasn't, so I got a phone call in the middle of the night from a nurse trying to get a better record than what went over from the assisted living. It wasn't terribly great. And so I explained to her what was going on. I asked what the problem was, and that his pneumonia had gotten pretty bad. I get a phone call from my sister about 5:30 in the morning, and she's saying that the pneumonia is getting worse, but she's an executive with public broadcasting, and she had to go from Washington to New York. So she's on a train, and we get a phone call, or she gets a phone call from the intensivist, all right? That is a person who works in the ICU, intensive care unit, with people that are beginning to fail.
Physician?
Physician, absolutely. And he tells my sister that my uncle's lungs are filling up with fluid, et cetera, and he can give him oxygen if we want. Well, first of all, he had very clear directives. He had a DNR, do not resuscitate, and something called a DNI, do not intubate.
What does that mean?
It means do not do anything to put a tube down my throat to drain my lungs or to give me oxygen as a supplementation by putting that tube in. They had an oxygen mask on him, but there was nothing further that they could do, and he wanted to step in. So he had my sister's number, and he calls her on the train. And my sister panics and thinks that maybe what she wants to do is intubate. And so the intensivist said, well, let me know what you want to do. My sister calls me. I'm in the hospital with my wife, Suzette. My sister's on the train between Washington and New York, and the intensivist is standing over my uncle at Hahnemann Hospital, and we have a three-way conversation. And he says, you know, I can give him some oxygen and make it a little bit easier. Not oxygen, I can help clear out his lungs. And I could hear my sister, she was wobbling just a little bit, you know, emotion versus practicality. And all of a sudden, even though it's my uncle, I had a total separation from being a nephew to being a professional in the caregiving business. I looked at my sister as the caregiver and the doctor as the doctor. And I said to the doctor, well, my sister is obviously listening, I said, look, even if we stepped in right now, don't you seriously believe that in the next 3 weeks we're going to see this whole thing happen again? And he said, probably. And I said, the next thing I would ask you is that even if we pull him out of this, what could his dignity or quality of life even remotely be? And there was dead silence on the phone. And so I said the advanced directives clearly say do not resuscitate, do not intubate. And so I turned, and I didn't turn, but I said to my sister, I don't want, when this is all through, for you to feel that I pushed you into anything. So you've just heard the discussion. Tell me what you want to do. And she says, I have to agree with you. So the intensivist, we gave him very clear directions that he needed to follow that advanced directive. And he said, okay. So he didn't try and put the Band-Aid on any longer. They started my uncle on morphine drip, the same thing that they would have done if hospice were there. Hospice was called in, but by the time they went to do hospice, my uncle had passed away. His heart gave out, and he had just fluid throughout his body. And so all I can say is, Uncle Robert, rest in peace. I would not have wanted to see him go through another round of this. My aunt, because of her dementia, hard of hearing, etc., my sister went into Philadelphia over the weekend. First, she had to get clothes to take to the local funeral parlor before we sent him up to Detroit, which is where he's going to be buried in the family plot, and that was another whole game. And she went with my sister to the funeral parlor in New Jersey, and she said her goodbye, but I don't think it really registered. And so that was, in all respects, I think that was good. And they were supposed to fly him out today. However, it was snowing, so he got snowed in.
Yes, he did.
All right. And so without making fun of what is a serious circumstance, we then turned to making funeral arrangements. Mm-hmm. And one of the problems is that the cemetery where he's going to be buried is the oldest cemetery in Detroit, and it's called Woodmere Cemetery. And my great-great-great-grandfather was one of the founders of that cemetery. And at some point, we had some 47 plots, which is definitely a family's worth. And about 3 months ago, I'm doing pre-need with the cemetery. And they said, you need to have notarized signatures and affidavits so that we know that the right people are going to be buried there. Now, when I saw the deeds, they were handwritten. They were done by a scribe way back when. And it was very difficult to find the paperwork. We finally found the paperwork from 1877. Wow. And I have one remaining relative in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, which isn't too far from Detroit. He happens to be an attorney. And so he helped us out in getting that affidavit done. So this was 3 months ago. And when I called up to make sure everything was all right, they go, what affidavit? Now and it was like, you can't be buried here. And so we started the wheel turning all over again. Late this afternoon, we finally all found the paperwork again, even after I'd faxed it twice. And so the bottom line is that the best laid plans, all right, even if you do pre-need and pre-everything, when it comes to the moment of truth, sometimes you'll find that not everybody works with the same harmony that you had thought they would. So I think that the thing that I learned out of all of this is we must respect an advance directive, a healthcare advance directive. This was his wishes, and I saw, and I love my sister dearly, but I saw where emotion, and I see it all the time professionally, but this time I saw it within my own family, where you can have a moment of doubt, should you question it and do something? And I clearly saw that there was no advantage to that, and she realized it as well, even though the intensivist wanted to jump in and do a little bit of heroics to keep him going, but there just was no reason to do that.
And that's perfectly understandable. We are human. These are people we care about. These are people we love. But that's why these advance directives are really so important, because they are declarations where the person is saying, this is what I want, and your role in this whole story is to see that my wishes are carried out, not yours and not what the consensus is.
Right.
It's that my wishes are carried out.
Right, and we are nothing more than the substitutes
Yes.
for our loved ones speaking through those documents. And so it was a learning experience all over again. I've been doing this for 26 years, and, you know, it was just another chapter, but a very unique one for me, because it was my relative, my family, and dealing with the medical system that still, in spite of those directives, wanted to step in and do something different.
And there was a second part to it, David, and you mentioned, or you referenced it early on. Not only were you dealing with what's happening up in Philadelphia, but Suzette had just gone through surgery. There was the post-surgery treatment that needed to be done. Again, I know you did a lot of planning on that. They didn't necessarily happen the way you wanted to. But it's very difficult to keep objectivity in line when we're talking about people we care about, and things don't happen at convenient times of the day. That usually happens in the middle of the night when we're half asleep.
Right, when we get that phone call that says, guess what, you're in a family crisis.
Yeah.
And so there it was, just the way we wrote it in the book, and the same way that I hear it over and over again in support groups and when I speak and people come up to me afterwards. And so really it was just a reaffirmation that this is still what everybody goes through, or not everybody, but this is still a standard of the best laid plans, the best set of documents, and yet people do want to try, as they say in football, to call an audible because emotion gets in the way of practicality.
It can't be done. Do we have time to start something new, or do we need to go to a break?
Why don't we go to a break, and we'll come back, because we got a lot of things that we want to talk about. You're listening to us on BZT 1230 AM and on CareGiverReality.com, iHeart.com radio.
This is Caregiver Reality with gerontologist David Levy. You can call in to speak with David on air, toll free, at 1-800-889-0267. That's 1-800-889-0267. Again, here's David Levy and more of today's Caregiver Reality.
We're back, and thank you for waiting. And you're listening to us, as I said, on WBZT 1230 AM. But next week, you'll be listening to us on WWNN 1470 AM and during drive time, 5 to 6. So if you're in your car, turn your radio to 1470 AM, and we'll be talking to you, and maybe that's a good time to listen to the radio, because just like tonight, Paul and I were driving up here from Boynton Beach, and there was a terrible accident on I-95, and we just sat there. And had we had ourselves on the radio, we would have been listening.
And we also want to express our gratitude to our listeners who support the program. Go on to caregiverreality.com, see what we're doing, because it really was the demand of our listeners that put us into drive time, and people are now starting to understand what our show is actually all about.
Right. And, you know, once again, I can only tell you that our relationship with medical research charities, which we've been talking about, who came to us and said, can we collaborate for you to give us caregiving capability, while we are the umbrella organization for 25-plus medical research organizations. And one of the things, I was talking to the CEO just before we came on, and he said, even though this isn't directly on point for caregiving, if you go to medicalresearchcharities.org, they just got in an incredible piece of video from Johns Hopkins related to breast cancer. And so if you're involved in that in any manner, if a loved one has it, whatever, or you want to learn a little more, this is some of the latest stuff out of Hopkins on breast cancer, and that's on medicalresearchcharities.org. And now that we're their caregiving arm, you'll be hearing us talk about it more and more. And
these are the kind of relationships that we're going to be looking to bring forward into the future, so that going to caregiverreality.com is really going to be a launch pad to getting that high-quality information as a caregiver to help make the best decision and look at the options in a very pragmatic way.
Right, and you get it kind of in any form you want, because you can listen to the radio shows. We have some of the support groups up. We have a lot of printed material. And as we said last week, we've been up now for 10 days on Kindle with our Family Caregiver Practical Problem Solving Manual. And Brenda, who's my editor, and I are just finishing our professional manual for non-clinical family caregiving that works hand in hand with the one for caregivers. And that should be out. It won't be on Kindle because it's too big and it has too many charts in it, but it will be available on the Caregiver Reality site as a PDF, or you can contact us through PayPal, and we'll send you a hard copy bound version of it, but it's probably close to 3/4 of an inch thick, and it's based on everything I learned and that others have taught me with all these years of caregiving, that from which the caregiver manual came into fruition, and this is now for professionals who really haven't looked at caregiving from a non-clinical side, and now are looking to kind of add that component, or at least have greater awareness. And Paul, you and I were speaking today. I'll let you pick that up from here with a woman out in California.
Yes, Vicki Kind was introduced to me through Purposeful Planning Institute, and
that's where we're going to speak, is it not?
That's where we're going to be speaking at their Rendezvous conference in
Denver?
It's in August in Colorado, yes.
Yeah.
And it's attended by hundreds and hundreds of professionals and non-professionals across a wide disciplines of fields. So there's attorneys, there's CPAs, people in wealth management, insurance,
doctors.
There are therapists, physicians, wide range of people. The basis of is collaboration in the best interest of the client usually drives the best decision, because you're not only dealing with the technical side of it, you're dealing with the behavioral side away. And,
right.
And speaking...
Right. It's kind of like the Mayo Clinic, all smart heads in the room when you go there, and they assemble everybody to listen to your story, so everybody hears it through their particular specialty and expertise, and there's nothing lost in charts or not hearing it the way you heard it. You can amplify it, and this is just a bigger version of that.
And these are very smart heads. These are most of these people are published, they're acknowledged experts within their field, and it's across a wide variety of topics. And we were invited for the work that we are doing in family caregiving, and their recognition that absent that component of planning for the caregiver, that circle of planning really isn't complete. And that really led to this introduction to Vicki Kind and the work that she's doing out in California.
Right.
And her background is very interesting. She is a bioethicist. And David, you had an interesting introduction on that from a few years ago. Why don't you share that with our listeners?
Well, one of the first elder care collaborations for mediators and others in the industry happened about 7 years ago at Temple University in Philadelphia. And all the disciplines, elder law attorneys, geriatric case managers, folks like myself that were, just a whole range, just similar, but, not necessarily wealth managers. And everybody was trying to kind of divide up the turf as to who owned what. And it became obvious at that point that elder law attorneys really didn't know a lot about caregiving, and that geriatric care managers that wanted to lay claim to all of it were great on clinical, but really didn't have a non-clinical feel. And so the mediators, of which I was one, as well as a gerontologist, I didn't wear my attorney hat back then, and so we all kind of struggled to do it. But one of the most interesting things was I heard a fascinating debate between a man by the name of Robert Baruch Bush, who was considered to be and is considered to be the father of transformative mediation. And essentially what that means is you kind of lay it all out and you sit very quietly and you wait for the clients to come to the realization as to what it is that they need to do. And he was debating against a woman, brilliant woman, who was a bioethicist. Her name was Nancy Dubler, and she was the bioethicist at Maimonides Hospital in New York. And the comment that she made, and maybe it will help the audience, is that she said to Robert Baruch Bush, "I deal with crises of the medical kind." And she said, when I have to deal with a family whose son they have to make a decision as to whether his leg should be amputated or not, if I had to wait for transformation to take place, he'd be dead. I don't have a lot of time, so I need to intervene, deal with the facts, and give the family the options and alternatives so that they can make difficult decisions very quickly. So it's just as it sounds. It's the ethical consideration in the biological world, whether that's the medical profession, the psychiatric profession, whatever it may be. Bioethicists try and inject an ethical theme into what it is that they do, and they come in all flavors and sizes. And when we were listening to Vicky today, she's been dealing a lot with caregivers having a conversation with doctors regarding end-of-life issues.
Always a difficult conversation.
Oh, tremendously difficult. I mean, that's similar a little bit to my conversation this
With your
past
sister.
week. All right, and even though we weren't dealing with hospice, it was one step away, and the intensivist then went on to do what hospice would have done. But I thought one of the remarks she made when we were talking about documents is that one of her lines for families is to turn around, because she said she has dealt in many cases where doctors and medical institutions have decided that they are going to do what they think is the proper thing to do, even if there's documentation that says otherwise. And she had a great line today, and she said what she tells the families, and she said to doctors, she said, "Doctor, this is no different than assault and battery if you keep treating against the wishes of the client that are clearly in writing and legal. And if that happens, your malpractice insurance is not going to cover this, so you're going to need to go out, hire a criminal attorney, and pay for it out of your pocket." And I thought that was a very telling remark, because when those documents are in the medical file, they should be no different than any other document in the file. It's there for a reason. It's there to be honored and obeyed. It's not there to be second-guessed.
And absent that, we went through this horrible situation here in Florida not that many years ago with Terry Schiavo. Because that document did not exist, it ended up being turned into almost a political football.
Well, and not only
expense
that,
of the
but
family.
you had people standing outside selling T-shirts that said, "I'll give Terry Schiavo a drink," because they thought they were, just denying her water and food. And it did turn into a political football. All of a sudden, at that time, Jeb Bush and the Florida legislature wanted to step in and have a say in something that was absolutely a very personal family matter. There should not be a legislative dictate as to what one does in end of life with a loved one.
Would you put your legal cap back on for a second? Because we throw these terms around because you and I are very familiar with them. When we speak about advanced healthcare directives, what really are those documents and what do they do?
Well,
for
an
us?
advanced healthcare directive said, or says in legalese is that if I am in a condition where I cannot speak for myself or act for myself, used to be in the old days instead of in a vegetative state, where you're literally were brain dead. But this is, if I can't speak for myself or do it in a coherent, competent way, then the people named in that advance directive have the ability to step in and speak for me. And inside of those directives, it clearly spells out the do's and the don'ts of what that individual wants you to be able to say, what they have said about how they want, if it's end of life, for their end of life to be conducted, what they want, who they don't want, where it ought to take place, et cetera, et cetera. So these are just like a will speaks after you've died to what you want your assets and other things to do, and is pretty inviolate unless, it was drafted when you were incompetent and family or others want to challenge it. This advance directive speaks while you are alive as to how you want your medical affairs to be done if you can't do them for yourself. And I hope I made that clear, but it really is the roadmap of what the individual whose advance directive it is wants their medical future to be conducted, or in what manner they want doctors and facilities to recognize and treat them.
Well, in the weeks and the months to come, here on the show and at CareGiver Reality, we're going to be getting into more depth and making more of our expertise available in helping families to look at these options and to understand what they are. We're not practicing lawyers. We're in support of family caregivers, and
Right.
we want to break it down such that they understand what
In
it is.
plain speak,
Yeah.
and not, either medical, legal, or whatever, stuff that's tough to understand. Because if you can keep it in plain speak, then people know what you're saying. You're not talking up to them, you're not talking down to them, and you don't have to make the presumption that they then have to go out on Google and start looking at what the vocabulary means, because we're going to just explain it the way it is. You're listening to us on WBZT 1230 a.m., and as I said earlier, next week we will be back on WWNN on Tuesday night from 5 to 6 drive time, and that's 1470 a.m., and we'll look forward to having you be hopefully with us there and then. We'll still be streaming live to all of the places that we do now. The shows will still be archived as they are every week on caregiverreality.com, so you shouldn't have to miss a beat. And what we're hoping in our own backyard is, because people in their cars and have a radio there, is that maybe we'll be able to reach more caregivers and to have a better dialogue and let them know, because caregiving is happening at a younger and younger age for older folks. I mean, I'm not just talking about your grandparents, I'm talking about your parents, and I'm talking about your spouse. Every now and then we also direct our conversation at parents who have young children that either have diseases at birth, or have autism spectrum, ADHD, who are going to be dealing with their child in a manner that's more than just mom and dad. You also have to look at them long-term as caregivers. And it takes a while for a parent to recognize that what they expected to be the normal role of mom or dad has now been changed because of a chronic condition that their child may suffer from. And we see a lot of that.
We have, and we've always said that wherever there is a disease, there are going to be caregivers. And what we are seeing is more and more that is coming into the world of addictions, which is a disease. And those caregivers, they need support and they need education as well. So we'll be addressing more of these topics in the months to come as well.
And we can call it disease/disability. And because there are many people that didn't get a disease but yet are quadriplegics, are wounded warriors that come home and have missing limbs and PTSD, which may be categorized as a disease or a mental condition. And these people need the same amount of help. And so anything that we can do to advance the knowledge of caregivers, and quite frankly, caregiving doesn't care what the disease is or what the condition is. And I've said that repeatedly. When we wrote the book on non-clinical family caregiving, it was because 85% of caregiving is practical problem solving, and the other is the 15% of the clinical or the disability that you need to know so that you are informed about what is happening to your loved one. But the real difficulty is dealing with the system, understanding it, having a plan, being able to know what your options are, make wiser decisions, so that you get the comfort of knowing that you did the best you could.
And I think what makes it special is that you and I are both full-time caregivers. So not only from the professional stance are we able to communicate and advise, but we live it on a day-to-day basis.
As
And,
Pogo would say, we are they.
yeah, we are they. And
Right.
we understand what it is on a day-to-day basis that you're going through, and you're not alone.
Right, and you've been great this last 2 weeks because you really kept my rudder pointed in the right direction.
My merit badge is in the mail.
Yes, you absolutely. You get a gold star and a merit badge. And I just want to remind people that caregiving is everywhere. We have 50 to 60 million caregivers right now of every size, description, age, ethnicity, relationship, you name it. And so it is everywhere. It's in the workplace. It's in your planned communities. There isn't an assisted living facility or independent living where caregiving is not going on, just as it does in many other households that are whatever it may be. And so when we can help people to understand their problem better, all right, because caregiving doesn't come with a set of instructions. I mean, we've tried to guide them with our book, but as we repeatedly say, there is no caregiving gene. It doesn't blossom, and your intuitive, innate skills don't take over.
They don't help.
Caregiving. It's an entirely different set. And it's 7:43. We got a few more things that we want to talk about. So why don't we go to a break, and we'll be back in just another minute. So stay with us on WBZT 1230 AM.
To contact David Levy directly after the show, go online to info@caregiverreality.com. And remember, caregiver is one word. Now here's more of today's program, Caregiver Reality.
We're back. I guess we had a little bit of a technical glitch. No, we're not. You're just watching my wrinkled face. We're back. Sorry about that. We kind of had a little bit of a technical glitch there. The mouse failed, so you had to keep looking at me rather than watching our logo.
We needed a caregiver.
Right. A caregiver technician. What can I say? So anyway, Paul, as we move forward and as we move into this new time slot, one of the things that we're going to be doing, and you and I have discussed this, is getting back somewhat also to the ABCs, because
Yes.
we're adding new audience, and we're also growing because of the relationships that we're beginning to have with other organizations. And it's critical that we don't assume that everybody understands what they may have been learning over the last 6 to 8 months that they've been listening to us, and that we really do have to start back at times at the beginning. But I was doing a support group this afternoon in the midst of everything else that was going on, and a number of what I'll call the veterans, this was a smaller support group than the one we do on Wednesday mornings. And we had some new people there, so I was going back through some of the ABCs, and the veterans said, you know, sometimes we forget that, and it's really, good to be reminded of the basics, because when push comes to shove, you're back at the basics. So we're not going to assume that anyone has a whole big bucket of knowledge that, you know, that we can just make the presumption that they'll understand. And I think that's part of our responsibility and our job.
It certainly is. And we also are very cognizant of the fact that we stream everywhere, not only in the United States, but around the world. And what we have or might have available in the Palm Beaches here in South Florida doesn't necessarily exist in other parts of the country or in other parts of the world. And we don't want you folks to feel that you're being left out.
Right. And we also understand that caregiving, just as I was saying earlier, has all different kinds of cultural differences, ethnic differences, religious differences, geographic differences, financial, education. So we can't, there's no such thing as a standard caregiver. And solutions don't come in one size fits all. So understanding how unique your circumstances are and how different it is from the same person possibly dealing with the same disease who lives next door to you is as different as night is from day. And we will be going through a lot of that. And as I said, now that the book is available on Kindle, I'm not sitting here to push the book, but I know from the years that we've been using it that there's a tremendous amount of useful information and a lot of truth in there. Also, the other thing I wanted to say, last week we were talking, and the week before, about that incredible piece of equipment I have in the house that's made such a difference. Mm-hmm. I am not going to be the one selling it, all right? But I have the distributor, who I will, starting next week, give you the website, and folks can go on that website and make up their own minds. I have found it personally to be great, but I don't want to be like everybody else and have, you know, folks on just to, you know, promote a product. That's not where we are. We have sponsors. We're looking for more that want to be associated, I hope, with the quality that we bring.
Selectively.
Selectively, and I look forward to that. And, one of the people that I had to give a shout-out to, all right, we have a great person in our friend Scott Greenberg. He's president of Comfort Care, and this past week, he was in the hospital the same time my wife was, so we were passing one another in the hall. And so, Scott, I know you're on the mend. I want to give you a big shout-out. And next Monday on his show, I'll be doing his show with him, and Paul, I think you'll be joining me as well. So it will be the three old men talking about whatever it is that Scott wants to do. All right, so I'm glad he's out of the hospital and on the mend, but he did realize that even though he's only 38, that it takes a lot of time to recover from what he had done. All right, and so he was up trying to be back in business this morning. And by noon, he sent me an email and a text message, rather, and he said, resting. So I could fully appreciate it, and I keep telling him, same engine, different gear.
Yep.
And so,
they don't run quite as smoothly.
Right.
You had asked me earlier about my weekend. A thought came to mind. It happened yesterday, actually. It was just a busy day. As you know, we were working together yesterday, and I was getting ready to go to physical therapy. Mm-hmm. And out of the blue, Debbie, my wife, just made a remark that just came out of nowhere. And I was very surprised by it. But I had to get out of the house and go to PT. And
physical therapy.
Physical therapy, sorry. And when I came back, I had said to her, I said, I was really surprised that you said that to me.
What did she say?
Well, rather not say. It was a rather strange comment. Let's just leave it at that.
Oh, okay. The mystery comment.
The mystery comment.
Debbie, I want to hear what it is when I speak to you later.
But, she said to me, she said, I was just having a lonely day, and I was not feeling myself, and I don't know where it came from or why it came from. And, You know, I was thinking on that later on in the day, and I guess part of what, as a caregiver, we need to do is really to take the emotional temperature of our loved ones. Because I told her, I said, you know, I have no way of knowing you're not having a good day or you're feeling lonely today. And if that is what's going on, we have to be able to communicate that. And I think that's something that we all have to keep in mind, is that we're going to have some really lousy days along the way.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just part of the process.
Well, you know, just by coincidence, before I left to go meet you tonight, Suzette is staying on our big wide leather couch in the family room because we have a very tall four-poster bed that people with knee surgery just can't get up and down.
Can't jump that high.
However, the first couple of nights, I was sleeping on this leather chair that we have, and after I needed to go see the chiropractor because I was twisted in a knot, I said to her, dear, I really have to go and sleep on my own bed. All right? The door's open. You know, I can hear you. I gave her, she brought from Ohio when we first started to date, and that's where she was from, this good old-fashioned, like, dinner bell, you know. And so I said, you got the bell next to you. If you have to, ring it. I'll be there like the fire department. And she said to me tonight, as I was leaving, she said, you know, I really miss us being in the same bed.
Yes.
And I said, I do too. However, this couch isn't wide enough for the both of us, and I just can't get back in that damn chair.
And it's hard to fight the dogs.
Yeah, right. Well, my 3 dogs are being very good.
Yes.
My teddy bear Pomeranian is over at my daughter-in-law's, and my granddaughter has now decided that she has adopted him. And his name is Mac Jagger, and he's just full of himself, and she just loves him to death. And so I have a feeling that we have lost Mac Jagger, but we're keeping Mackenzie, all right? McKinsey.
Yes.
All right. And McAngus. All right. That's our other 2 dachshunds and a bloodhound. But the teddy bear Pomeranian.
Do they come with fries?
Do they come with fries? Yes. And but they're great, and they are tremendous emotional support from my wife, and a pain in the butt from my daughter-in-law because she has 5 other dogs herself. So this is number 6.
Well, interesting you said that, because a few years ago when we moved into the condo that we live in, they had a strict no pet policy associated with the condo. And I was unaware but learned there is a classification beyond a typical service dog called an emotional support animal, different than a therapy dog that does not carry a lot of legal standing.
Right.
But in terms of that emotional component for our loved one, an emotional support animal has, at least here in Florida, a lot of rights for the one that needs that support. And I know the cat, our little Katie cat, has made a world of difference at home. And that, and it's going back to what I started with, is that it's not only the physicality of the loved one that we take care of, and how bad is the pain, and you take your medicines, and how are you feeling today?
Cats and dogs don't ask that. They just give you unrequited love.
They do.
Right?
They do.
They just curl up and it oozes out of them. And that's the wonderful thing about pets. I could use an emotional friend. Dear, if you're listening, I'm talking about the 4-legged variety. Thank you. Freddie has got his hands in his face as he's our producer, and he's now laughing. He just can't believe that we just said that. And anyway, folks, just to go back over a couple of things, as I told you, and I'm just repeating it so that we don't lose anybody in the transition, we will be on next Tuesday on WWNN 1470 AM, and we're going to be on drive time from 5 to 6. So we hope that not only will we see our regular listeners there, but that we'll be adding all those people stuck in traffic on I-95, and those of you that don't live in this end of the world I-95 is like our Long Island Expressway or route, the Pennsylvania Turnpike, and when it gets congested, you're stuck.
And along with our move, we'll be bringing from time to time some very interesting guests, as we have in the past. We'll be looking at specific topics as we go forward to give a little bit of insight and education along the process, and we'll always be available to answer questions.
Right. And for any of you that would like to suggest things that you might want to hear, info, I-N-F-O, at caregiverreality.com. Just send us an email and tell us what you'd like to listen to or a subject matter that you'd like discussed. And between Paul and myself and those that I can reach out to, we'll try and give you the best answer, break it down, make it usable and understandable, so that if you're having a problem with something and we can help, that's what we're there to do. That's what we've always been here to do. And we're going to continue to do that. And as I said, we're making some great relationships with some wonderful organizations that's allowing us to grow. Our footprint is getting better and wider, and I'm very pleased. And Paul, since you've been a part of the show, we have really added a whole new dimension to things. And
Thank you, David.
I must thank you for all of the help that you give and the knowledge that you bring.
Thank you. I really appreciate the compliment.
I don't want to kiss, but I just wanted to tell you that.
But what you are going to get is admiration for all that you have contributed through the years, through those support groups, from the caring on a day-to-day basis, and now to be able to do this to a much larger group of folks out there going through these struggles. I'm really excited to be part of this and to continue to grow along with Caregiver Reality and devote more of my time and energies to make that happen.
Well, you know, this is something I've been waiting for you to finally, give it your full-time attention, and I'm thrilled to have you. And while this sounds like a mutual admiration society, folks, I'm just telling you that with Paul here, it just makes all the difference in the world. And they're giving me the signal that we've got a little over a minute left. And so I want to thank the BZT audience for being so good in the 3 months that we've been here. Look forward to having you follow us on WWNN 1470 AM. And I'm really very excited about moving to drive time. I think that we can really make a difference and get to even a bigger audience, and not to worry, as I said before, if you're not available, the show will be on caregiverreality.com. It's archived there. We've got a number of new things that we can't wait to do, and people that we have been talking with who want to be part of the show, whether it's call-in, Skype, in person. And so you're going to be seeing even more diversity, more interesting people in the coming months and years. And as I said earlier, please give us your suggestions, tell us what you want to hear, and tell us how we can help you as caregivers to have a better quality of life. And so, America, South Florida, America, and the world, this is our last show from BZT. I want to thank you very much. And Paul, take it away.
Well, been wonderful here. We're looking forward to our move. Want to thank our producer, and the best is yet to come.
Yep.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Caregiver Reality. Each week, David Levy, a gerontologist with over 25 years of experience providing practical, realistic help to caregivers struggling to keep up with the needs of a loved one unable to care for him or herself. To reach David Levy online, go to info@caregiverreality.com. See you next week on Caregiver Reality.
Fox News.